Hey folks, good morning. It's Thursday, May 15th. Namaan here, joined by my co-host Jenny Rae for another edition of Market Outsiders. Jenny Rae, how are you this morning?
I am great, Namaan. Last night was rodeo night in Northern California. And so it was pretty wild, very American, a pretty exciting time. And still, I managed to connect the dots to business. Can you believe it?
I can believe it actually. Just tell me you didn't wear that blazer to the rodeo.
No, thank the Lord. I have a great cowboy hat, shirt. I've got the flannel, the jeans. I mean, I live on a farm after all, so I can have both hats. Actually, I want to point on that really quickly as we get started today, because we're going to talk about Walmart. I'm going to bring up some headlines. But I had some conversations with university partners yesterday. We guest lecture at a lot of universities. We do workshops, and one of them asked a question, and I've been thinking about it ever since then. The question was, how do you build business acumen? And like when you said, I hope you didn't wear that blazer to the rodeo, I think like part of the problem with building business acumen is that we think of it as something that you study. Like we think of it as something that you learn from a book or something that you like learn in class. And it's if it's in your major, you get business acumen. And if it's not in your major, you don't get business acumen. And I was at the rodeo last night specifically thinking like, I don't think that's how it works. Right. Because a lot of the rodeo conversation is around a rodeo family, right? This kid grew up in rodeo. This kid understood from other people what rodeo is like, how to ride a bull, how to, on their first horse at the age of 2. um, and that's actually how you get businesses from everywhere. Like that, like you get it from waking up and being around it all the time. And and I had an experience at the rodeo last night where there, like, you know how everybody kind of tunes out when the sponsors come out? Like in rodeo, it's a little bit more fun because it's a woman who's riding on the back of a horse and she's carrying a flag with a sponsor on it. And sometimes the horse does not go the right direction. So it's a little bit entertaining. But like I was really interested in who sponsors the rodeo. And there were local sponsors, many of the companies that I know, and then there were also national sponsors. And one of the national sponsors was a huge company that I had never heard of. And I actually took a video of the stagecoach that had their name on it, which travels around to different rodeos, and looked it up because I was like, I wonder if this is a private company because I've never heard of it. So maybe before the end of the call, if I'm clever enough, I'll see if I can pull up this photo, the video. They are kind of like photos, actually, Naman. They're like, you know, live photos that have the movement in them. But I'll see if I can pull it up and I can bring up the company. But I've been reflecting on that question, like, how do you build business acumen? One of the challenges is that like you can't take a certification class to get business acumen, right? Like you build this muscle by muscle every day. And so anyhow, thoughts on that? How did you start building business acumen? Did you always have it? Did you grow up around it?
No,
Did you come out of the womb talking about financial statements and EBITDA? Honestly, sometimes I
I,
wonder.
I would have had no friends growing up if that's how I'd come out of the womb. So
But you
no,
did
I
have
did not.
friends?
I
Because
did have
honestly,
friends,
that's
but
never been
believe it or
confirmed
not,
either.
yeah, believe it or not, I did. So no, I grew up, my first passion, my first love was government and politics, right? And so like I would think about that and I would think about sports. Like that was me growing up, right? Like two-track mind. And so I started to learn about business acumen first by doing it. So by starting work, by trying to resell things online. One of the ways I got through some of my secondary schooling is I would flip cars, right? And so like I didn't know anything about the car market. I didn't really even know anything about cars, but you learn, right? And you see an opportunity. You're like, you know what? There's like a supply demand imbalance in this market. There's not a supply demand imbalance in this other market. So can I go procure supply from that other market and bring it here and sell it for a markup? Oh, yes, I can, right?
Did you
So
think of it as supply and demand, or were you just like, I want to make money really easily, and I think there's like a way to do this? Because there's
yeah,
other words for that too,
there
arbitrage,
are.
right?
The
Yeah.
arbitrage, yeah. I certainly at that point didn't know the word arbitrage. I'll be honest with you, right?
Okay.
So,
Okay. That which is cool, right?
yeah,
I'd
right.
rather
And
have you learn it that way and know what it actually means than somebody who learns it
100%.
in a book and can't figure out how to apply it
I
in the marketplace.
uh, You'd rather live it. Arbitrage is one of those words you really want to live. If you know it and you don't live it, that's frustrating. So, um, and it's one of the most beautiful words in the English language to me now. But yeah, I knew the terminology supply demand, right? I've taken like econ classes in college, but I think really it was just like noticing, hey, like prices for used cars in this market are so much higher than I expected. Why is that? And I think a big part of building business acumen is knowing the right questions to ask. You don't even have to have
Mhm.
the answers. You just have to have that innate curiosity. Like, why did Walmart announce this morning they're raising prices? You don't have to know the answer, but you do have to be curious enough to ask the question and be willing to go down a path of exploration to figure it out. And the more that you can ask questions that connect to your real life, the better understanding that you'll have, right? Like if you shop at Walmart, if your family shops at Walmart, then you already have an innate understanding of the value proposition, of the brand promise. You have an innate understanding of why customers go there, of what the product offering is, the service offering is. So start with businesses you know and start asking questions you genuinely don't know the answer to. And that to me is the best way to start to build business acumen.
Come on, if there's literally any proof that I knew what I was doing at the rodeo a little bit last night. There is a cow that is walking through my front yard right now, and it is definitely not supposed to be there. So right after this call, I most likely will take off this blazer, but I may not, and I'm gonna go get that cow out of here.
You
But
should.
also, I want to talk about Walmart, and I think that I'm gonna actually share a headline that I found this morning because I think this is like I think your point is super well taken. In fact, specifically for me, because I would have it 5 years ago not paid attention to this news. I wasn't a customer of Walmart. I didn't buy things from there. I was not in their segment of shoppers. I also wasn't an investor in Walmart. And in 2020, I became both, actually at almost the same time. In part because Walmart got me to be a customer, and I thought if they're tapping into a segment of the market that I'm in that they haven't been in before, likely, I think that's really positive for them. When I divested of all individual stocks, I divested of it not because I thought that it wasn't interesting anymore, but I became very much more attentive to Walmart in that exact way. And so I paid attention to things like the actual issue that we brought up recently, which was the self checkouts that were disappearing from Walmart. I think I brought that up like what 2 days ago. Um, and I was thinking like, hey, you have to understand that there may be other reasons why something like that would happen. So let's take a look at tariffs. Right, Walmart's tariff price hikes are likely weeks away. And this kind of subtext, right? The retail giant said Trump's import taxes remain too high to avoid passing along to shoppers who could start paying more for some items as soon as late May. I think some of my question for you, Naman, is this a surprise? Right? Because this is one of the things that we've been talking about, the difference between information that was baked in because they planned for it. We already have said that prices would be increasing based on not even realized tariffs, but uncertainty around tariffs. This is the realization of tariffs too. Can you just talk about a little bit what you saw when you saw this news article this morning?
Yeah, it wasn't surprising to me. Look, if you go
And
outside of
but do
Wall,
you think it's going to surprise the market?
I think it actually surprised the market to the upside because, pre-market right now, Walmart shares are up 2%, which means that, this news wasn't priced in. And I think what the calculation is that investors and traders are making is there's going to be an incremental uplift both on the top and bottom lines due to this news. Like this isn't going to, it's Walmart. Like where do you trade down from Walmart? So if Walmart raises prices, they're going to raise prices less than the competition. They're going to eat more margin. They have the ability to eat more margin than the rest of the market. So you're not going to trade away from Walmart. You're still going to go and you're going to pay higher prices, but you're going to pay prices that are less high than like Target or other places that you could go instead of Walmart. So I think what the street is pricing in here is that revenues are going to go up because prices go up, and margins at minimum are going to be unaffected. And so I don't know if it's in this article or not, but as of right now, 9:25 a.m. Eastern, right before the markets open, shares are up 2%. And so I think
Mhm.
to the markets, this is a surprise to the upside. Now, when I saw this news, I wasn't surprised at all for a couple of reasons. Uh, Number one, I'm thrilled that we've come to some kind of preliminary agreement with China that reduces the tariffs from 125% to 39%, but they're still 39%. And when you look at like the non-grocery kind of sections of Walmart, a lot of those goods are imported from China. And so I think it was unreasonable to expect Walmart to be able to eat all of those kind of tariffs without passing some of the cost onto consumers. But I think the bigger issue is this, and this is how I'd be thinking as a business owner who sold goods is, you know what? I'm in an environment right now where I have a scapegoat to raise prices. And so why would I not test raising prices and just see where like the price elasticity of demand is for my consumer? Like how much are people really willing to pay? And I'm able to blame an entity outside of myself for raising prices. So why would I not experiment right now? Because we've talked about this ad nauseum, Jenny Ray. Like 70% of the US economy is US consumer spending. We still have jobs, right? The unemployment rate is just a tick over 4%. As long as people still have jobs, they're going to keep spending, especially at places like Walmart.
I'm going to highlight this. Right, sales rose by 4.5% at US stores, and the company's e-commerce business notched its first profitable quarter. I think that Walmart is probably trading up today, not because of the tariff news only. In fact, maybe not even because of the tariff news at all, but because of this, because of what you just said. Because if in the first quarter we would have seen a realized loss in consumer momentum, this would not have materialized, not both of these. It is possible sometimes that Walmart sees an after a fall on effect when people trade down from other higher price segments into Walmart in times of lower consumer confidence. But this increase in sales, I think, is potentially also what was unexpected, not just the company's pricing power, which maybe was already
Mhm.
predicted. I also like this is a little bit of an afterthought, but I think this is incredibly significant.
It
Have you ever
is.
bought something from Walmart's e-commerce business? I actually like have thought about doing it once or twice and literally almost never have. So kind of curious about you as a customer if you've done that.
I think literally once in my life, Walmart's e-commerce business had something that Amazon didn't have, and so I went there. But like we're a Prime household. We are not Walmart Plus customers, and so I think that it's fairly impressive that Walmart's gotten to profitability in its e-commerce business so quickly at this, and that they've achieved the scale that they have, right? Their e-commerce revenue went up by 22% last quarter. And so I think one of the things that you're seeing is that the revenue growth continues to accelerate. Now they're starting to catch up on the margin side, right? They built in some of those economies of scale. And, what's driving this, at least in part, is something that you mentioned at the beginning of this call, is that Walmart is tapping into a higher income consumer segment. And so what's happening, at least in part, is that you have kind of higher income demographics that are quote unquote trading down to Walmart, right? While the rest of the country stays with Walmart. And so, I think what you're going to start to see is a shift in market share. Anytime you have economic uncertainty, I think companies like Walmart win. And overall, the US consumer is still strong. Walmart probably has more exposure to the US consumer than any other one company in the country. And so, they're maintaining share in like the lower and middle income demographics. They're gaining share in the higher income demographics. That's good news. They're at an inflection point in their e-commerce business. That's good news. They're raising prices without forecasting a dip in demand. That's good news. I think, they're ticking every box. And so the business looks strong.
One of the job opportunities that I had, if I hadn't gone into consulting early on in my career, was to work in pricing at US Airways. And I think,
That's a
I
blast from
thought,
the past, US
oh
Airways.
man, you know it, dating myself a million times over. But one of the things that I think is super funny about US Airways in general and the pricing is that like I thought that was kind of like peak pricing sexiness. And now that I'm into it, I think like being a fly on the wall in these Walmart pricing conversations would be phenomenally interesting. I think the fact that they're thinking about taking share, I think the fact that they are, focusing on this again is masking what's really going on here. I think that people are excited about these kind of more sustainable moats that they're working on building in an incredible in a competitive environment where there's a channel that they literally have almost not touched at all. Anything else you want to say about Walmart before we move back to what I want to talk about around the rodeo? Because I think this is so fun too. I've got just like a last closing thought about this.
One super quick comment is I think if you want to understand kind of like if you want a snapshot of the US economy and the US consumer, like Walmart's the first earnings report I'd look at. And so I'm excited to dive in deeper and see what Walmart's saying, about kind of where they expect demand to go for the rest of this year. Because I think if you had limited time and you just had to go listen to one earnings call or look at one 10K or kind of view one earnings report to get a sense of where the economy is overall, Walmart's the company I choose first to look at. And so I'm excited to dive in and can see what they're saying about kind of the future health of the US consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right, let me see if I can pull up this video from last night. The company, I'll kind of give it as a spoiler, and I'll pull up the video as a little bit of a visual aid, is Quanta Services. Naman, tell us what Quanta Services does.
No freaking clue. I know Qantas Airlines, but Qantas
I
Services, no idea.
know, Quanta Services. So my immediate thought was like, I bet that we are here, and I've got a video. Let me see if I can play this. Oh, this is so cool. It's a very short video, but it's still worth it because, like, I mean, how often do you get to see a video of a podcast like this? I'm gonna just share my entire screen. It's probably the easiest way to do it. All right, let's see here. This is, can I expand this? Probably should do this before
Hmm.
here we go. There we go. Okay, you got it? I mean, that's pretty cool, right? Um, Let me stop the share now. It's always dangerous to share your whole screen. You never know what goes out there. But ultimately, I think that one of the fun things about this was that I was like, what is Quanta? Like it must be a company that I should probably know. So I looked it up, and I can share more, kind of in person. But Quanta is a large publicly traded company that provides electrical services contracting. And like when I say large, I mean like $25 billion large, right? And it's based in Houston, Texas. This is the kind of firm that we would have served at Bain, and nobody would have wanted to work for them because they weren't sexy, like consumer facing public company. But man, this is a really interesting company. And it started with a guy who went to a Midwest business school in the 70s, and and then he went and worked at an electrical contractor, bought it, and then was like, hey, I should buy more of these. And I think he's bought something like 900 over his
Wow.
tenure. And he's rolled them up, and they are now one of the largest electrical services businesses that contracts for utilities. So like the power lines that run to everybody's house that we literally never think about, we just switch lights on and imagine that it happens by magic. Quanta is behind a significant amount of that. And like we were saying earlier, I showed up in the blazer. We'll close the call now because the markets are open and it's time to go. But I didn't wear the blazer to the rodeo, but I didn't take my business hat off because I was sitting there. And if you're interested in this, you soak it up everywhere. And so I'd love to do a deeper dive on Quanta at some point because I think it represents the kind of company that a market outsider would find interesting, not just a market insider. Although the fact that they were publicly traded, I thought was also interesting as well.
I know
Anything
what
you
I'm
want to say
doing.
to the folks? Oh,
Well, I was just
what?
gonna say, I know what I'm doing when I jump off this call is I gotta go take a look at Quanta, because that sounds like an incredibly high margin business. It sounds almost recession proof, serving utilities, providing those kind of services. You know, we need electricity no matter what the economy looks like, and so I'm intrigued.
I am too. So it'll be fun to kind of dive into more companies like this in the next couple of days. Thanks, everyone. Tons of news, lots